Hello, and welcome to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin. Thank you so much for joining us again. In the news this week, multiculturalism, actually last week. In Ireland, a person of color, an immigrant, stabbed 5 people. The ensuing riots, shockwaves through Europe, shockwaves in this country. But really, is it any surprise? Now, let's be clear. We do not condone violence in any form, and we certainly do not condone violence against law enforcement or the police. But the media is attributing this to the far right. We can talk about that spectrum of ideology in a second. They're also attributing it to the radicalization that comes from social media. So I guess social media is okay when it's on this woke ideology and when it's Black Lives Matter with these mostly peaceful demonstrations of 2020 and 2021. But the point here is that multiculturalism is a failed Western experiment, and here is yet another example of that failure. What do we mean by multiculturalism? Multiculturalism is where you take in other cultures into your culture, and they do not have to integrate, they do not have to become part of the social fabric, so they become part of society, but they are not part of society, if you will. You see it in all the Western countries at this point, and I defy anyone to show me an example of where multiculturalism, trying to blend all these different cultures into one, has succeeded. There's not a single example on the globe that anyone can find and anyone can point out, at least not to me, and I've looked pretty hard at this. The other thing to understand is that multiculturalism was the harbinger of woke politics and identity politics, because everyone is their own culture, and your culture is just as good as mine. And that's fine to have your own culture. But it is the opposite of the nation state. Remember, the nation state used to be where people would immigrate to America and wanted to become part of America. That doesn't mean that you have to give up your own language, but you wanted to become part of American culture. You wanted to learn the language, and you wanted to be American. Now everything is these little fragmented groups, social groups, ideology groups, racial groups, and now it's into LGBTQ and all those other identity politics groups. It fragments society. It pulls society apart. There is no social unity. There is no cohesion outside of your identity politics or your culture. And again, we can juxtapose this. Canada was supposedly the poster child for multiculturalism, where it was a mosaic, where people of different cultures would come to Canada, but they would not really become part of Canadian society as much as they would maintain their own cultural identity, which is all well and good to a point. Now, how's that working for you, Canada? Multiculturalism has failed there as well. In this country, Michael Savage famously said that a culture or a country is defined by border, language, and culture. Well, right now, our culture is diverse. It is not a single American culture, because that would be bad. Because again, the nation state is a bad thing. It is xenophobic. It is, and especially since it's colonial and it's white, people of color are oppressed by white people. That's what this is about. You can candy coat this any way you want, and I'm not here to prescribe racial politics or that the white culture is better than the non-white culture. But multiculturalism led to identity politics. It has failed everywhere it's tried. And you see the latest example now in Ireland. So again, I don't condone the violence, but let's understand what led to this. And this is a failure of liberal Western leaders not understanding the impact and buying into this elitism of one world, right? Because under the one world theory, all cultures are equal and all cultures should get along. And if some cultures don't get along with other cultures, like clearly the one culture is a problem or the other culture. It's total crap. And this is, again, what we're fighting against. And the whole concept of this far right ideology, you have to remember, this is about a spectrum. So when the entire political establishment shifts hard left, then what used to be the moderate right is now the far right, according to the media, according to the elites, according to education. Again, as I said before, find me a single example in the Western world where multiculturalism has worked. So when you see multiculturalism or examples of its failure, understand that we are in some respects being hoisted on our own petard yet again. And for those who don't remember the reference, it's being exploded by your own bomb that you planted. We did this to ourselves. Nation states have their place. People need to belong to something. When they don't belong to something, i.e. a nation, they're going to find something else to belong to, whether it's a radical group so defined, whether it is a new religion of wokeism. But it is at odds with the stability that the nation state provides and the identity of who you are, where you belong, and the culture that you're a part of. And by the way, notice that no one is migrating to the non-Western world, really. Everybody's coming here, so we're the ones who are supposed to adapt to all these new cultures. And it used to be that these cultures wanted to integrate and assimilate into a single fabric of a country. Not anymore.